Top 5 decks for August 2022 pre-possible ban list. Don't think 30% of you guys have not smashed the living crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so we can climb up the 100k ladder here. Number 5 on this list. Now, disclaimer here. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting takeaways from this, but there's always going to be a lot of interesting thoughts on possible tier list and evaluations of the format. So, hear me as I explain some of this. So number 1, or number 5 for this take, will actually be Flounderies. Now, Flounder is, it's in an interesting place. As we enter a couple more decks into the possible tier 1 category, this deck's matchups still remain actually king. The fact that you have 2 more decks entering into the format, actually 3, that basically can do all this special summon management, you know. M-Pen's going to be roaring really, really loud here as this deck stands on top of the apex of really a lot of the other possible contenders down below it. And like I said, as we get further into this tier list here, and I explain more and more of these possible shifts here, you'll see. But I mean, Flounder didn't lose anything as of yet, which means that this deck still gets a huge boost at controlling the field. Advent, and you know, I'm expecting that we go into a hand trap format here. It's actually one of the biggest things that I kind of want to mention is, like, you're already in a hand trap format to a degree, but I think we're going to head into a much larger one where you see a lot more players just kind of be taken back by some of the overall interactions, empowering, you know, Valor coming back in here, you know, the power of Ash Blossom getting a chance to be relevant here, even Imperm storming back into a format here, and then, you know, things like that. Advent's going to get a lot of extra overtime here, being able to dodge those key hand traps out here. So I think that Flounder is going to be a very, very, very good place in the format if you want a good anti-meta deck to keep up. Next up here is going to be Sprite. Now you're like, wow, you're placing Sprite this far down? Yes, I am. Looking at Sprite's overall interactions in the very early stages of deck development here, I think you're going to see a lot of players not really know how to get ratios steady in the very early weeks. I think you're going to see, I want to say, like, more hand trap oriented builds that can lead to more bricking. While the deck does have like Swap Frog and other things like that, you've got to ask yourself, how much gas can I floor when playing this particular variant? And honestly, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to how much extension capabilities will this deck be able to build into itself and then survive. Now, my favorite part about this deck coming into the format here is you love to see the power of Dark Ruler No More. Dark Ruler No More and Droplet, both being 2 cards that look at this deck, and unless this deck doesn't have smashers backing it up, 1 Dark Ruler No More means that you can play the game and just smash through all of it. Now, if your opponent opened up, you know, a lot of hand traps and things like that in order to, you know, kind of cover its bases with this, that's like the biggest thing that, like, this deck really needs, is you need to be able to capitalize, build this huge board, and then have stuff to back it up, so in case, you know, your field gets, you know, swiped up or something. I'd even go so far to say that, like, Raigeki and Lightning Storm, actually, Raigeki is one of the most hilarious things to do with this deck. Yeah, they have a negate. I can't wait for somebody to comment down below and be like, well, you just negate the Dark Ruler No More with the spell negate. No, you can't! It's not how that works. Alright, you can't respond to Dark Ruler No More with monster effects. Alright, I've read that before, and I don't know if you're trolling or if you just don't know how the game works, but stop that right now. Alright, I do think that this deck is going to have a pretty hard time. I think it'll be fine. We also have number 3 here, which you can change with 3 and 4 here. It's actually going to be Tier Elements. Now, Tier Elements does not have the Ishizu stuff, alright? You're not going to see that crap until November. So before you're like, oh my god, Tier Elements, I do think the deck is a little bit further ahead of a lot of the rest of the format here. Oh, also, side note back on Sprite, Dagda with the help combo, if you get fully uninterrupted through hand traps, pretty good. Anyway, back here on Tier Elements. So, you have an archetype that basically combos with the danger package, does a whole lot of dumping, and then gives you the ability to fuse during the opponent's turn. Okay, that's pretty good. I just got to get some sort of big milling effects oh, this deck is notorious for making window. That's like the whole reason why like everybody is like scared of tier elements as a whole. Besides like the fact you just generate this infinite pile of advantage going do 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 do. You know, the deck just poops out a window with like a Draco Stapelia, you know, whatever other advantage you just raked up throughout the entire milling session that you just had. I think that a lot of players are going to look at this deck, and like I said, you can interchange this with Sprite and tier elements, but a lot of people are going to have very different opinions about this. A lot of people are putting these two decks very high up on the podium here at like tier 0.5, and I don't think that's the case. I think in the very early stages that while these two decks seem massively powerful at the end of the day, they feel like they're missing just a little bit more. And while tier elements feels a little bit less than Sprite, you know, in terms of getting off the ground, I do think that the deck does suffer from, you know, hand trap-itis. But honestly, tier elements can play through a lot more hand traps than Sprite. And then you just get shifted and you're like, okay, that's it, folks. That's all she wrote. And you're just like, oh, okay. Number 2 on our list here is going to be Punk. Now you're like, Robbie, you're putting Punk above tier elements and Sprite? I don't know if you guys just saw, but Punk tore through the extravaganza, or Pack just tore through the extravaganza last week, playing pure Punk. Now, what does that tell me? Well, you're getting a spell card that says, want to draw 2 cards? Okay, go ahead. All right, you're getting a built in-house synchro for the deck. Okay, depending on how a ban list shows up, will determine this deck's overall standing in the format. But what you're telling me here is, ladies and gentlemen, that a field spell that draws 2 cards in an already like very good combo deck, it's bad? Look at me. Look at me. Come on now. I think that honestly, Punk might actually stand above the 2, depending on, you know, if Hauk ends up going away. It's really going to depend on, you know, like an established list and things like that to see where Punk is. Because as we head on into this format here, I look at Punk and I'm like, wow, you have some of the best tools available to you as an engine, all right? Like, honestly, Eat Elliott 3 was... it's a real ride, man. Let me tell you what, it amazes me so much how much players just look at this deck and go, nah, there's no need. All right, like, I think the deck is very scary. I think the synchro toolboxing options of it are really, really, really underestimated by a lot of players. And I think, honestly, like I said, I think Pack has the right idea here for what you want to do with the deck. And we'll see as we go forward here what levels of innovation that this deck will be able to take here as things all go forward here. If you haven't noticed, everything in the format did get a little bit faster, and that's a really big thing to kind of acknowledge here at the overall run. So yes, I know Exorcisters are a deck. I know some other things are going to be decks in the format too, but I'll explain that in the second part of the top decks of the month once we get there. But number 1, I would say highest potential ceiling in the room is going to be Dragon Link. Now somebody's going to be like, Robbie, all you do is just talk about Dragon Link these days. Well, I've heard and seen a lot of playtesting for Dragon Link players, and they're tearing through Sprite. All right, as long as a ban list does not tutor through and destroy this like deck's overall ceiling, I think this deck's going to be the sleeper deck in the format. Now, you know, you have Based and all these other like variants as well to Dragon Link. Now, it's not like you can't play the Rose Dragon package in this, but honestly, I think this deck is really scary. You know, Japan never really got to experience our version of Dragon Link over there. And when I look at our current version of the deck, you know, especially like once the next little part of this comes in, I mean, doesn't Dragon Link and Sprite do effectively the same thing? But Dragon Link can play through hand traps way better than Sprite can at certain points, all right? So that's one big thing you gotta kind of a gauge and adapt for here, is that adaptability and ability to handle said hand traps really, really, really is going to put you through for the best thing. So those are my top 5 to start off for the block here. Now, I'll explain some of my other reasonings and things, but honestly, Sprites and tier elements, I think there are scarier things that lurk in the format that a lot of people just haven't really figured out yet. Guys, leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think. Make sure you guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button. See your beautiful faces back here later today, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.